if it's good, you will find a way to go out there and suffer and make it fun for yourself. And it kind of reminds me of how snowboarding used to be in the beginning, where it was like, it was just so new and so fun, and you were so desperate to do it that it didn't matter if you were getting frostbite. You were still going to go and do it, and that's kind of how surfing has grabbed onto my soul.
Welcome to the Not Snowboarding Podcast, a delightfully tasteful glimpse into the other side of snowboarding.
This week on the podcast, AJ and I are joined by my friend, neighbor, and general partner in crime, Paul Horning, for a chat with Todd Richards. Paul's my surfing, snowboarding, and skating buddy, and he's the recent father to Chloe and Isabel, the twin girls born on Halloween night, as I think I mentioned back in episode number 2. I was planning on having Paul on the podcast much earlier, but as he puts it, the two little poop machines are a full-time job and then some. Between Paul's list, AJ's list, and mine, there were hundreds of topics that we wanted to talk with Todd about. I think AJ could have talked with him for hours about commentating alone. That said, we did get to cover a slew of topics ranging from surfing to asshole parking, and I even learned what a humpkin is. We had a little background noise from time to time, mostly in the beginning, and the only consolation I can offer, since some of the noise was coming from the resort Boreal, would be to check out the Instagram account called People of Boreal. It's really good for a laugh and very much in line with the tone of today's conversation. I think Todd would approve. I'm in my basement here with my buddy Paul, and Paul and I went surfing yesterday just south of Ocean City, Maryland.
Woo! Were there waves? I've heard you guys have had kind of a fun little run of swell there since like Christmas, basically.
Yeah, the summer was actually good. Summers usually really suck, but the summer was good, fall was good, and winter's been okay so far.
Rad.
Usually winter's the best though, but I'm sure there will be some stuff coming in soon.
I tried to surf Ocean City a couple of years ago at Dew Tour, and there was not a wave.
Yeah, it was crazy because they were having that. I think that was the year they had the surf contest there.
Yeah, and they had to tow everybody in, but like I wake up early in the morning, and because one of my friends is like, "Dude, you totally got to bring your stuff. What if there's a hurricane?" So I hauled all my shit all the way there, and there was like 15, 20 people out right next to the pier, and like it would look like there was a wave, but it wasn't really a wave, so you just like paddle in circles for like 3 hours.
Yeah, it can get really bad. We're 3.5 hours away, so we gotta really check all the info online and make sure everything is gonna come through. And the webcams help too. But
yeah, East Coast, dude, we had to earn it.
Yeah,
every place sucks.
Yeah, it's tough, especially being 3.5 hours away. We've done plenty of days where it's like calling to be good, and we drive down there and it's horrible. We're like, well, we'll go skate.
Already windy, right? Yeah, at least you guys have like good parks and stuff near you.
So Todd, thank you so much, man. And first of all, happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Yeah. Yes, it is my birthday.
It's rad. I'm kind of one of those people that on my birthday I like to like shut down and just go snowboarding and not talk to anybody.
Yeah, it's like one of those. I'm at the point in my life now where I try to forget about the birthday, and like I have this weird fantasy that if I don't think about it, then I'll forget how old I am. But people tend to remind you a lot of how old you are.
You can't get away from it on Facebook. Your Facebook just goes insane.
All my friends, like, they pretty much show their love by calling me old. So that's I can't escape it. There's no escape.
Running a very similar friend group here.
Yes. Yeah.
And the second thing I want to thank you for before we get into the chat today is thank you for all your support for my personal business, Shred Souls, over the years.
Oh, no worries. I still, I've been running those things since you sent them, and it's like I can't ride my boots without them. I love them.
That's awesome to hear, man. Yeah. I'll definitely send you a new pair after a couple of years. I'm sure that you're ready for a fresh pair.
Yeah. I tend to ride stuff until it like disintegrates. So, yeah.
Very cool. So we connect. Yeah, go ahead.
No, they last a pretty long time, I found. Yeah. I just found out my boss yesterday rides without insoles.
What?
Like, he's like, he's like, no, it makes so much, like, he was trying to convince me to ride without insoles. Like, no, dude, like, you get so much more, like, you can get a smaller boot, you have so much more room, like, it's great.
Get so much better seam feel.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that seam feel that no one really gets anymore.
It's so good.
It's a vintage feel of snowboarding. It's good.
So we connected the other day, and you said that you have like 100 things that you want to talk about on the podcast, and we probably don't have time to even really scrape the surface. But
Right.
one of the first ones that you talked about was something that is, I want to say, near and dear to my heart. Is folks that are out there snowboarding, getting tricks, but can't even ride. Right?
It has to do with just, I guess, where and when I started in snowboarding, and like how you needed to learn how to really turn a snowboard before you could even attempt to hit a jump, you know? And growing up back east is a pretty big deal as far as really learning how to ride ridges, So it's a weird one to see people just being able to dance around on rails but not actually be able to turn after they come off the rail.
Right, and I think we were getting a little bit of feedback there. AJ is
Right.
at Boreal. I asked him to mute. So if one of the other things along those lines was some of the trends in snowboarding and how some of them don't even make sense, and some of this might pertain to you, AJ. So we might have to kind of mess
Yeah,
around with the
let me
background noise
ask.
there a little
I
bit.
just need to know. Okay, so the super skinny stance. Like I've had this conversation with Jed Anderson, and I'm like, what is the deal? Because we've spent a long time in the evolution of the sport, going from when I first started that all the sim stances on the boards that I rode in the beginning were stock as wide as you could go, 17 and a half inches. That was it. We were always like, oh my God, the stances are so damn narrow. It's really hard to land anything. And then, it took a while for stances to kind of widen up, and they went really wide, and they kind of came back to just like natural shoulder width. So I want to know firsthand what it is that you are stoked on about having your stance. So like, how wide is your stance, and why are you so stoked about having it?
12.
Well, I mean,
12 inches?
personally, I kind of, my thing with my stance on stances is that it should be just comfortable. It should be like when you step on the board, what feels comfortable. And that goes with angles and width and whatever else.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see it both ways. I see people with like super big stances that I'm like, dude, that's holding them back. Yeah. Or I see people with really, really close, small stances. I'm like, that's holding them back too. And it should just be kind of comfortable. Mine's pretty moderate. I'm like 21 inches. 20 inches.
That was like 21 inches was like when the stances first started to get big. Adam Merriman was the first one to go 21 inches wide, and he used to write 21 inches on his board because it was so like, oh my God, look how wide his feet are apart. But then things kind of just once we all started to go a little bit wider, we kind of figured out that it was a lot easier to land things, and you weren't always in the back seat. So I mean, I guess 21 inches is a pretty. I was thinking that you were running a 17-inch stance or something crazy.
I ran that once for like a couple days. It was kind of funny.
I think you ran that for a few seasons, JJ.
Do you remember Tyler Berrigan? Do you remember that name at all?
Yeah, I do. Why do I know that name? Where is he from?
Oregon, like Skeleton Crew.
Oh,
like
okay.
Those dudes.
Yep.
But he was the first person I ever saw have like a dramatically small stance, like
awkward.
Like small. His feet, like his heels were almost touching, and he would like back lip like 20 stair rails, and I was like, that looks crazy to me. That looks insane. But if it works for him,
right?
I'm not really bothered either way. Like a lot of the people that I like have completely different styles than I do, or like way or have a completely different stances or dress completely differently. So it's like, to me, it's like all kind of cool, and if it works for you, that's great, and like it's not a big deal if you're different than me.
I don't think that's a big deal at all. I'm strictly trying to figure out. It's just like it just seems so awkward, just the same way that the fact that you could actually live between Shaun White's feet, that's like, it's a really strange. I don't know how. I've tried to put my legs that far apart, and it hurts. Like, I just don't know how that could even be.
I remember T-bolting back in the baggy pants wide stance days. Yeah. T-bolting to get like a 26-inch stance, and it was so unnatural feeling. But I mean, I could lay down some serious carves. Yeah. But I remember, I think it was John Kramer was like, "Oh man, you got to try a narrow stance. It's so much better to spin." And
Kramer said that?
Yeah,
but Kramer used to have a giant stance.
Well, he did, but I think he went to like a 19-inch stance, and then I think it was him that said it to me. So I I narrowed my stance a good bit, and I've pretty much been stuck at like 22 and a half for the last 10, 12 years or more. But
well, I mean, there was back in the day, like I think there was a period of time in Colorado where, between Tarquin and it was basically all the Aggression Snowboards Twist crew.
Yep.
All those dudes, especially this guy Quinn Sandoval from Steamboat, dude, he had a stance that, I shit you not, was probably 26 inches, and it looked like his knees were going to break. Like it just didn't look. It looked so. It was like a 4-year-old would draw a snowboarder, like foot on the tip, foot on the tail, and just like you look like a starfish, and it just didn't. It looks like it was so painful.
Yeah,
I don't know how it landed anything.
I remember I won like a GNU Dukester a long time ago at a local contest, and I ended up T-bolting it, and I think it was like a 146, and at the time it was the smallest board I had ridden, and I remember it had like 6 inches of nose and 6 inches of tail because my stance was so huge.
And you were like, "Oh, I'm totally fine with that. That seems like an adequate amount of tip and tail on there."
Yeah, it was cool because I mean, like you were saying, all the twist guys, like there was a lot of dudes that I was watching ride back then that I was like, I want to ride like them.
Yeah.
So I'm like widening my stance out, but I think with the skinny stances, for one, in my opinion, is you look like a stick figure snowboarding. Like when you're up on a rail, you're like standing straight up and down.
Right.
When you're trying to really tweak grabs and really kind of show your style, it's tough because your legs are so straight and almost stuck.
Right. Yeah. Unless you have really short legs.
Right.
Like Ali Goulet used to ride. He was one of the first guys I saw kind of ride a narrow stance back in the day, and it wasn't that narrow. It just seemed really narrow, but he was like really short, so it didn't look so crazy. But I think it's like the kids that I see ride the really tight stances. Usually, it's a certain type of dress, and they wear the like super tight, well, not tight, super tight pants, but like fitted clothes. So yeah. You kind of have that scarecrow thing going.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of it's a weird one. It just looks weird. Looks like there's a lot of effort involved, but if it works, it works. That's whatever. It's just kind of, I was always wondering what the technical merit is. Cause I mean, people have always said to me, oh, it feels more like you're skating, but you don't really ever ride around. Like when you land a trick, you're not landing your trick like you're about to ollie into another trick. You know what I mean? Like you're not like 360 flip, and if you land with both feet, like 1 foot bolts and the other foot like 2 inches from it, it's not like that. Like you're Wilsoning. It's not. Like, so that's that. I guess that kind of breaks it down as like.
Colin Lentz was another man. Colin Lentz was I'm sure you probably remember him. He was the East Coast dude. But he was also a mini man. I mean, he was a little dude, but he had a pretty narrow stance. But he was one that could make it look really good. I mean, dude oozed style. So.
I mean, hey, everyone, you can make anything look good if you get the right style.
Right.
Gee, seriously.
Paul just reminded me of my GNU Dukester, and growing up in the middle of nowhere, Montana, I didn't know about T-bolts. I just had wood screws in my dad's basement. So, like you said, the stance options were, I think 17 might have been wider than what was on my board. So I was seeing all the videos with the guys that you mentioned before with the wide stances, and I just wanted a normal stance. I just wanted a shoulder width stance. So I took the wood screws. It might even been like sheet screws or something. And so I took and just used these little wood screws and then went almost like for our surfing mission here. It was 3 hours to the nearest major mountain. Yeah. Got there, dropped in on the first trail, and both my bindings ripped off immediately. And I was done for the day.
That's Moro used to be like, in the very beginning, we didn't have inserts. Like we had to put the sheet metal screws through the bindings. Like you'd have to tap the binding or tap the binding screws or put helicoils in there. And we used to joke that I used to have a Makita in my car when I would go up to the hill because I was guaranteeing I was ripping out. I would have so many screws in my bindings. Like I used to run like the second evolution of like the Sims freestyle binding, kind of like after they went from those bone spur pain traps into like a more traditional kind of a binder. Like, and
with the toe ramp?
What's that?
With the toe ramp?
No, way before the toe ramp, dude. We're talking like 1991, and I used to fill because there was like 3,000 holes in the base plate, and I swear to God, I filled up like 98% of the holes with screws just so like they wouldn't rip out. And then, I mean, this was before I kind of figured out that T-bolting was like a thing you could do.
Right. There was no standard hole pattern. There was just a shitload of holes in the binding base, and then a shitload of holes on the board.
Yeah.
And you had to just kind of like see if something would match up, or in your case, screw it in wherever you wanted it.
I want to think that early Rosinal boards might have had that too, because I was working at a local hill whitetail in South Central PA, and they had a bunch of Rosinal rental boards. And for some reason, I got my hands on one. I was riding one, but I was riding it with the really old Sims bindings, or it was like the original Sims binding, and it was more of a clasp than like a binding.
Yeah.
And I remember wood screwing it into the board. And I remember my front binding fully pulled out when I hit a jump. And I don't know how I'm still alive.
I mean, it was funny too, because a lot of those boards were like that. But yet you had to have a leash, but yet the leash was attached to the actual binding. So
Right.
It made no sense. Like, you could rip out of your board becomes a missile, and you're like, but I still got my leash on. And walking around and your bindings on the hill.
Yeah, I mean, and in South Central PA, they were so, up until like probably a year or two ago, they were so hardcore on leashes, and I'm like, look, guys, the leash isn't doing anything. It's connected from my binding to my boot. If my binding pulls off the board, it's useless.
It's like one of those things. It's like a insurance safety clause that people are just going by for sure.
I've seen way more skis become torpedoes from like their brakes not working. Like preset like park skiers, like their brakes are always like broken. So like when they pop off, they just like are these missile torpedoes and just taking people out. It make way more sense to me if they had leashes. But yeah, I mean I don't know. That's like the disconnect at ski resorts for sure.
Yeah, and I mean you got to take into consideration like just. Of course, snowboarding is dangerous, skiing is dangerous, and if they can have like one little pink ribbon on it, like, yeah, but if they have leashes, everything's cool. Skis have brakes. But it's like, I remember when I was learning how to ski back in the day, we had the leashes on the skis, and you would fall, and it would basically just tether these spears to your legs that would just hit you in the back of the head as you like tumble down the hill. So I don't know what's worse, I guess taking out a family of 4 below you would probably be worse, but...
I worked lifts one season at Whitetail also, and it was so funny because the natural fall line of like the beginner / intermediate trail there, the natural fall line came right down to the lift, and the only thing, there was several runaway skis every season just shooting down right at the lift, right where everybody's boarding the chair, and the only thing stopping people from just getting murdered was a little like pond, and it was only like, I don't know, 10 or 12 feet wide, so you'd have skis that would make it over that pond and just go flying into people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing where snowboarding used to be. I mean, like, and skiing too, just the weird technology and like what the trends were. And Stevie Alters, when we used to ride at Vail, Stevie was like this gem of a human being that was so on his own plane of reality of what snowboarding was. And I could go on for hours about Stevie, but one of the things that he had going for a while was he replaced all the hardware on his bindings with ticket wickets at one point. So ticket wickets, because he wanted to have extra tweakability. And then after he kind of got over that, after his feet flew out of his bindings, every other day, he then would run his snowboard boots so loose and sloppy that I actually saw Stevie land tricks and have both of his feet come out of his boots that were still attached to his board.
I remember that Stevie Alters, was there like an article in Transworld about the ticket wickets, or was that more of like a trick tip, like how to fix your bindings if you're in a stuck situation where you've lost a screw on the hill?
Yeah, I mean, there might have been a trick tip about it. Stevie was an enigma. That guy he was on such a different plane of like progression and things that he would do and like his weird little rituals and yeah. But I think it was either a Transworld article that was on Stevie. I do remember it though. It might have been like J2 and Stevie were like those guys were inseparable, and they would come up with some weird stuff.
So what do you say? You're like out at a cocktail party and you're meeting like Joe Schmo who doesn't know you from anyone else.
Yeah.
And they say, "What do you do, Todd Richards? Nice to meet you. What do you do?" What's your reply to that?
Well, it was back in the day. It used to be I'm a pro snowboarder, but now it's like I think it's easier for people to wrap their head around. I just tell them I'm a sports correspondent for NBC. I'm an analyst, snowboard analyst for NBC, and they're like, "Well, what the heck is that?" And then I'll just kind of elaborate. And once the Olympics comes up, people people tend to get it a little bit more. It has like that stamp of legitimacy because you're saying NBC. I don't really have to explain myself anymore. Like, oh, you can make money doing that. I'm a sports correspondent.
Very cool. And I think that makes sense. I can see how, mom and dad and grandpa all of a sudden can go, okay, I get it. Where if you just say, even probably before, if you just said I'm a pro snowboarder, that's going to need some explanation depending on the audience.
Well, it did until the X Games kind of came around. And then it was like, then things, I had relatives that were basically criticizing me for my life choices and telling me to stop being a bum and grow up, to all of a sudden being at these events with like pom-poms and like homemade signs. You know what I mean? So it went from like, you're just a derelict to, oh my God, this is a big deal. We're here to support you. It was kind of a weird transition in my family life to go from like people not like really not supporting to all of a sudden, being 100% behind you in weird ways.
How did that transition come about? I know that there was maybe an injury involved and it kind of opened up a little bit of time in your schedule.
Yeah, it was around 2003, 2004. I think it was actually December 2003 that I shattered my humerus bone I was riding at Park City during a Rossignol sales meeting thing. It was like first run of the day, came up short on a tabletop on a really flat light, and I don't even really know what happened. It just felt like someone Charlie horsed me, and my arm was disconnected to the point where I sat up after tumbling, and I was like, "Oh, whose arm is that?" And I was like, "Okay, that's mine." I almost passed out, and so I was basically incapacitated for a good 3 or 4 months of like solid, downtime. It was a really bad break had a lot of surgery and a lot of nerve damage and all kinds of stuff. So X Games came around and they were like, "Hey, you're hurt. Do you want to sit in and help out doing the commentary for pipe and slopestyle?" And I was like, "All right, sure." So that's exactly where it started. Was during that. And then I think I did a announcing gig at the Vale Sessions or something like that, where I was just doing live announcing. And it was fun, It was like I'd drink a coffee and just go up there and run my mouth.
I tell you, you're the perfect person for it because you know snowboarding better than anybody, and you're very humorous to watch. Every time, like even the Vans U.S. Open of Surfing last year, when you were like kind of calling people out, like it's not an air reverse, it's a 540. Like it's good humor. It's good to watch. I look forward to every time you're announcing something because I'm like, all right, he's going to set him straight, and it's just fun.
I try to do my job and make it entertaining at the same time because, I know how critical I was back in the day when I would watch the snowboard contest be broadcast on whatever weird network they used to be on, like the U.S. Open and stuff. And I would hear, the commentators just blow it, or, anything that you would hear someone talking about the sport and just not getting it right. And I just try to get it right. I try to come at it from a point of view of both your grandmother watching it from the couch and also from the hardcore dude that's, giving up 60 minutes of his day to watch, really good snowboarding on TV. I don't always get it right. Like there's a lot of times where I'm like, God, is he goofy or regular? And you start calling the run wrong from the beginning because you're not sure what footed the dude is. But for the most part, I try to stay on it as much as possibly can. It's a lot of addition now. I'm doing a lot more adding in the air than I am anything else. But yeah, I really try to stay true to the people that take the time out to watch it, because it literally is like you're taking 60 minutes that you could be doing something else and staring at a television. So I'm there to entertain you.
Were there ever any cold feet when you were first getting into it? It's a little bit different to be, yes, you've already competed, you've already been on television from a competitor, but as a competitor, you're focused on doing your thing, as opposed to now.
I go into the zone when I do the commentary stuff the same way I would when I'm competing. The time that I get weird and I get weirded out is when I have to do stand-ups, where I have to memorize a lot of stuff and regurgitate it, in my own words, but I have to hit all these different points, and it's live, or, we're taping it and you're in a time crunch, and it's just a lot of dialogue. And I've had a lot of gigs like that lately where it's a lot of just, okay, well, here's what we need you to say it. and there's a ton of people in the background, and it's a weird one. That still gives me anxiety like you wouldn't believe to do that. I get really nervous and I start to like sweat and stuff.
How hard is it to be able to tell? I mean, when I'm watching it on TV, past 1080, I have no idea what they're spinning. I mean, do you know the guys so well that you can tell, like, oh, that's Mark McMorris's, that's his triple 14 or whatever. Like, do you know those guys that well that you know what it looks like when they do that trick? Or are you just looking at it like we are going, holy shit, what was that? That was a...
Well, sometimes, like, if it's really something where I'm like, what the, like, oftentimes the camera angle gets it, but sometimes they don't. Like, they'll cut it off and then start, like, all of a sudden you just see the guy in the air, and I don't know if he took off switch or if he took off, whatever he did. So that I'll just be like, oh my God, and then wait for the replay to say what it really was. But for the most part, I can kind of tell by the initiation of the first part of the spin how many it's going to be. And then I just look for, is he landing backwards or is he landing forwards? Because, 1440 it's gnarly and it's a lot of twirling, and anything past a 14, it just looks like a human Cuisinart when they leave the lip. So then you're just looking for if they're landing switch or landing regular. It is hard to do sometimes. And like I said, like if I get it wrong in the beginning, like if the guy drops in and I'm mistakenly think he's regular foot and I start calling the run wrong from the top, and I don't know, by the time I get to the third jump, I have no idea what the hell's happening. I'm like, oh, is that? And then it's hard to kind of go back and be like, well, apparently I called that whole run wrong. I think it just comes with, being able to see what's happening in the initiation of the spin. But like, for instance, like his 16 that he did at the Olympics, like when you're spinning that hard, there isn't a lot that looks different from a 1440. It just looks like a hell of a lot of effort off the lip of the jump.
Right.
And initially I didn't even think Sage did anything that awesome on the last jump. I was like, oh yeah, there's 14. He did one of those his first run, and then waited until the replay, and I was like, holy crap, like he won a whole extra, rotation. So you really have to pay attention to it. And it's a lot can be lost if you're not counting the right way. So I don't know, maybe my brain is just kind of wrapping itself around it a little bit better now as I'm used to it, and how people are just human tornadoes off jumps at this point anyhow.
Well, and what's your thought on that? I mean, back when we all grew up and we were riding, it was, style was king, and nowadays, I mean, and not that there's guys that, there are plenty of people out there that are spinning big spins like that and can make them look really good. Mm-hmm. It seems to me, and a lot of other people, it's more of a acrobatic thing and aerial gymnastics or whatever. But, no doubt it's hard, and there's a lot of people that cannot do it and can't even think. I couldn't even imagine even doing a double cork, but there's some guys now that can actually make them look really good.
Well, it's a benchmark thing. I think people need to hit that benchmark to solidify where they are in a position in the sport. It's like, I want to be an A-list pro. I need to have 3 triples on lock.
Yep.
Then they get those triples, and the only time they will ever do those triples is during a high-pressure contest situation. And that's kind of where you can really tell where it's going. I mean, people are not really throwing triples in the park for fun, like on like a Tuesday afternoon, but you'll see a hell of a lot more really stylish backside 540s, good front threes, 180s, just the stuff that we grew up with, the tricks that you can really put your English on. And I think that will never go away. I think, some people are making triples look really, well, I shouldn't say triples. I don't know. Right. It's kind of hard to make a triple look really good.
Yep.
But doubles, I've seen a couple people stall the doubles in the middle of the air. I've seen people grab, with weird grabs, like watching someone do a back double cork 10 or switch back double cork 10 and grabbing either switch indie or indie, because grabbing indie really slows down rotations like that. And that's rad. You're taking a big risk. But still, you're not seeing a lot of people aren't just chucking that stuff willy nilly. Like because there's so many consequences that go with it. Like a lot of these kids are saying, I need to learn the double this year. They go out and do it. And then the next time they do it will be when there's a camera on. They're not just chucking a double. You're not going to see someone at Loon tossing a double on like just your average day. I'm sure it's really fun to land one solid every time you want to.
So AJ took your advice and he ran to the bathroom. Now he actually ran up to his boss's computer, and he dropped off on the call there for a little bit. But I'm dialing him back in, and I just wanted you to know because we'll probably hear some of the Skype noises.
Totally.
I'm back.
Hi.
I'm back. Hey, Todd.
Hi.
Much better,
Sorry
dude.
about that.
AJ.
No,
And you and I were messaging back and forth, and I apologize for all our listeners that had to hear all the dings on my computer. But to catch you back up, AJ, and I know one of the questions that you had, it'll be a little bit of a backup for us, but we were talking kind of about how Todd got into commentating and then some of the trick progression since then. But I know one of the questions that you had, and you've done tons of announcing and super high energy, but if you want to go ahead and share that question that you had with Todd.
Yeah, hit me.
Yeah, I kind of, I think I just was wanted to know, like, if you had any advice for someone who wants to get into announcing bigger contests, like, what would that be? I mean, I guess it helps being having a really awesome professional snowboarding career, but, someone who hasn't maybe had that, what would be your advice?
Well, the biggest thing I can say, I guess when I watch other people, is just be calm. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way that it's hard when you're announcing live events. You got to stay super high energy the whole time, and it's exhausting and it's taxing, but it's a lot different when you get in the booth to announce a contest, because you really do have to do it a little more professionally, because just your levels will get blown out on TV if you're just screaming the entire time. So, obviously knowing everybody, kind of really being educated on some people's backgrounds, being, involved in the sport so that you know what people are going to do before they do it. Being able to have a relationship with the riders where you can go up to them and be like, what's going on? Are you hurt? Give me the inside dirt, and have people be trusting enough to give you that information and trust you enough that you're not going to use it in a malicious sort of way. Yeah, I think it's just really knowing the sport and just trying to conduct yourself as professionally as you possibly can, really. And who you know. A lot of it's who you know, and I stumbled into it completely by accident, and I got really lucky. But there's a lot of people that, I've been trying for a long time to get into it, and you need to be relaxed. Like, being relaxed on camera, or giving the appearance that you're relaxed on camera, is probably paramount about what really needs to be underneath it all, for sure.
That's pretty interesting, because that's like something I for sure struggle with. Like, I get so excited and it's hard to contain it. And that's what my friends have said, like, dude, you're too wild. Like, and I'm like, I know I really am, but like, I'm just so pumped to see like crazy snowboarding. Like, I'm such a fan that when I see it, I'm like, whoa, that was insane. So like, that's really interesting. That's something I will definitely work on in the future.
You don't want to be dead. You don't want to be a corpse behind the mic, but you have to find a happy medium between Brad, Jay, and say Preston Scott. Be in the middle. Like, Brad is over the top, like, blah, or like, Mark Sullivan. A lot of these guys, like, they get really animated, and they know everything they know all the tricks and stuff. But you want to be able to have a good time with it, keep your levels normal, and be entertaining while not offending everyone as hard as that is. Because when you're armed with a microphone, you want to say bad stuff and see how far you can push it. As far, like, every time I've done a live announce event, I just want to see how far I can possibly push it without getting fired.
I've definitely pushed it in the past. I was announcing like a Rome pre-jibulation.
Yeah.
And the Rome guy was like, just make fun of your friends. Like, he wanted that. So I kind of made fun of a couple people, but then I made fun of my friend Cooper a lot. And Cooper, I'm sorry if it messed you up. But like, the more I made fun of them, the more they liked it. And they were like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, I was like, all right, judges, you don't have to watch this run. Cooper's not going to land anything. So just do whatever you need to do. Turn around. Make a sandwich. And he was just getting so bummed out, and like, I was joking, obviously, like, I didn't, I wanted him to do well, but he got really bummed, and I was like, that wasn't that funny.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know that one too, because if you're friends, I've had people back in the day be the announcers, or even kind of recently in some of the events that I've done, and the announcer thinks they're having a great time, but then you're like, shit, man, just give me a break. Like let me kind of like have a little bit of self-confidence. Don't rip me before I even drop in. You know what I mean? So it is a fine line to ride that between like really giving your friends grief and making them feel really good about it at the same time. I mean, I had one contest that was at North Star. It was a Vans Triple Crown, and I was doing the live announcing for the Rail Jam. And same reason, like I somehow got on this thing where I started to make fun of Leanne Pelosi, and it was funny. And it started out with like, Leanne's from Canada. She can't understand a word you guys are saying. It started there. And then it just started to get deep. And then it started to go into like menstrual cycle. And it was just, I mean, I was getting the feedback from people around me laughing. But, I had someone come up to me later on and been like, dude, that was a little bit too gnarly. Like you can't, like it's a little too inside, and that was like a big lesson for me where I was like, okay, I need to dial this down a little bit, because just because your friends are laughing doesn't mean that 98% of the other people are laughing. You know what I mean? Like your friends probably represent like such a small portion of who can hear you on the microphone. So you got to like, you got the lesson, your buddy taught you your lesson, and that's that.
Have you ever like bummed out a crowd because you said something? Like, have you ever like groaned?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah, but I mean, like not to the point where it was really bad. I mean, it was just like having fun with them. It wasn't like when Dingo started a chant of white power at the U.S. Open of snowboarding one year. That might be the all-time low in snowboarding announcing, and I know for a fact that Dingo did not know, like he was just oblivious. Like Shaun White came down and he just is like, yeah, white power. And he was like trying to get people to chant white power. And I'm like, oh my God, like, please. When you're so embarrassed for somebody else that it hurts and you almost have to leave. Like it might as well be, that's how it was.
It's funny. We had the same chant at my wedding, but it was based off of the Chappelle show.
But it was real.
One time I was like announcing a contest overseas, and like there was an American rider riding, and he like fell, like it was kind of a big bomb hole. It was a rail contest.
Yeah.
I said something about, oh, you can tell he's American the way he's dropping bombs or bomb holes like that. Yeah. And everyone groaned, like everyone was like, oh my God, like so offended. And they came up and like, that's not funny because Americans actually kill people.
Right.
Wow.
They were so bummed out. Like that was the one time that I was like, oh, too far.
Or announcing each country's rider in their accent. That is also, I've learned is no, you don't want to do that. Don't do that. That's not good.
At what point in your career did you realize that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was it part of the transition from pro snowboarder into the commentating world? I mean, you do several other things and have done a few other things, right? From running websites to snowboard companies, and now some involvement in the beer world too.
Well, let's see. Entrepreneur is kind of that's a funny one, because it goes back to that old golden saying in the snowboard industry. If you want to get $1 million in snowboarding, start with 6. And that's the easiest way to get $1 million in snowboard companies. And that's pretty much how Omatic operated. And I'm not going to go too in depth on that one, but yeah, we really get shafted on that one. But that was like my first intro to semi snowboarding entrepreneurism was that one. And it's a rad thing to do, to pour a lot of effort into a company and actually get a board to ride on that you had your hands on from beginning to end, and the marketing. And I love doing that kind of stuff. I love coming up with stupid ad campaigns and dumb little, punny sayings for ads. And I live for that. I love doing that. And it was really fun. It was really fun to do.
I know you don't want to get too deep into Omatic, but from my point of view as a retailer at the time, Omatic was fucking cool because it was disruptive. It was better price points and better margins. It just seemed like a new business model, as opposed to going out to one of the 6 or 10 manufacturers and coming up with a and a brand identity and having a couple cool team riders, you put together a different business model than what everyone else was doing out there.
Well, we had such high hopes, and in the beginning, it really was something we were like, shit, let's turn this on its head a little bit. And it was at that point, I was really fed up with the fact that snowboarding was a rich white kid sport and that no one could really even afford to do it because snowboards were $5,000, it cost you $5,000 a season to get your season's pass, get your snowboard clothing, get your boots, get your board, bindings, whatever the hell you needed, gas to go to the hill. It was like a gigantic chunk of change. So I was like, okay, well, why these snowboards don't cost that much to make and to market? So why don't we bring a board to the consumer that will retail at $299 but has some of the same features? And it was a cool thing, and we thought we had it going on, but it was kind of like a bunch of people just blindly stumbling forward while not really kind of thinking about a better business strategy for the longevity of the company, for sure. So it was really cool, and I had a good time doing it. And I thought those boards were some of the best boards that I'd ever ridden in my life. And that's, it just goes to show that it doesn't take a ton of money to be poured into snowboard manufacturing to make a good board. You just need to design it the right way.
Yeah, back to the rich white kid sport thing. Like, that's it's so true, and that was one of the most frustrating things for me growing up competing. Was I would go to these contests. I mean, living in Maryland, growing up in Maryland. To get to good contests, I had to drive up to Vermont. I mean, we had the Mid-Atlantic Snowboard Series, which I competed in and everything. But if you wanna kind of move up and get to the bigger contests, you had to go up north. And it's like an 8-hour drive. And I would drive up. I remember several times driving to Killington or Stratton, like driving 8 hours, getting about 2 hours of sleep in my car in freezing cold weather, waking up, and then here's back then I was competing against like Keir Dillon, Matt Cass, Luke Wine, and a bunch of those older dudes. And I'd show up and like their whole families are there. They're like staying in hotels, and it was so frustrating. And even to this day, I'm 38 years old, and if I need new outerwear, new bindings, new board, it destroys me. And I even get stuff at cost from the shop that I've been riding for 20 years. So
it's no joke, dude. It really is, like, it's so expensive. I mean, now I have a couple kids, and my kids grow out of shit at an alarming rate. And I've never really been, I don't like asking for handouts from people. Like, I'm not that guy. Like, if I have my hookups, but like, if my son he was dying, he had to have the Darth Vader board a couple years ago. So I went and bought it. I want to contribute to the, whatever the industry, and it's expensive. Like, it costs so much damn money to outfit your children to basically have them ride for a half a day, and never mind a kid or being someone that like wants to go up to the hill and ride every weekend, just getting there, just in gas money alone these days, it's ridiculous. So that was our whole thing, was like, look, if we can alleviate a little bit of money and put that money into your car so you can go on a trip a little bit further. That was our thing. Like, that was our motto for the company back then.
Yep. At what point did you decided that you wanted to do a website just full of like awesome shit?
Well, a buddy of mine who his kids go to the same school that I do, he's a web designer, and he has this site called word.com, WERD, and it's kind of like a men's, it's basically like, if you remember like Maxim or Stuff magazine, where they just did the gear reviews, and it was always like the really cool, like the coolest of the cool gear. And he was like, yeah, I'm skewed towards a certain demographic. Do you want to do like action sports, like a younger lifestyle thing? So I was like, sure. And in the beginning, Awesome was product reviews, like snarky product reviews. And eventually I just started to see a lot more traffic and a lot more numbers when I posted videos. So then we kind of went all video. And then, so that's where we are now. We're just like a curated video site that I kind of try to pick and choose, neat videos from the internet that I find interesting to me. It's a lot of car. It's a lot of snowboard, skate, surf, and some just random people getting hurt. You know,
Full
pretty
circle.
much everything people want to watch.
Full circle to our conversation before about skiers and their breaks. It's like Jerry of the Day, right?
Oh my God, that is the
best
most
shit ever.
incredible thing ever. Jerry the Day is it's like the highlight of my morning. It's so good.
How did you get involved with the boys over at St. Archer, and what's kind of the backstory there? And caveat that with I quit drinking now, but Paul's doing my share of it right now for me.
Congratulations, Paul. It was Josh Landon he was a filmmaker. He did a movie on Taylor Knox. He did a movie on the Malloy brothers. He actually did Pterodactytus' documentary. And I met him through Pterodactytus when Omatic was still going on. And he had read my book and was like, I want to do a documentary style, or basically just kind of a light movie version of your book. And I was like, okay. So we did, me, myself, and I did that with Josh. So we became friends through that. And then a couple of years down the line, he was filming something with Mikey Taylor and Paul Rodriguez, and they were just in a hotel room one night, and they were kind of just thinking about energy drinks and how much energy drink money was in the skate industry, and like, what the hell, like, no one wants to constantly be jacked up on energy drinks. Like, what is the opposite of the energy drink? Is there a market? And it was like the conversation kind of came around to beer. Like, what does everyone want to do at the end of the day? Drink beer. Let's establish a skate, action sports marketing campaign to beer. And that's how that took off. And I was just good friends with Josh and Mikey, and they were like, hey, do you want to become part of this? And I was like, okay, sure. Who doesn't like beer? And that's kind of how it started. And that was like probably 4 years ago. Where we are now. Do
you guys have any plans of getting any of that on the East Coast? I mean, I know there's a lot of expenses with taxes and stuff like that and shipping. Because I actually, when Nate asked me to sit on this podcast the other night, I was stopping by the beer store and I was like, hey, can you guys get beer from wherever? And, I wasn't sure how it worked. And I was like, have you ever heard of St. Archer? I said, I've been really wanting to try it, but it's as far as I know, it's only sold on the West Coast right now. Yeah. And he's like, well, good luck getting it shipped to Maryland.
Yeah, there are a lot that it's like the distributors are like mafia in beer. We're learning that a lot. And it's to bring you, beer has to be fresh. It's not like wine where you want it to just sit. Obviously, you know that. So to get the beer from California to the East Coast, not only do you have to deal with distributors, we have to really deal with making enough beer to be able to adequately service the East Coast or the Midwest or even Colorado. So right now, we just have the facilities to make beer enough to cover the West Coast from the San Francisco Bay Area, Sacramento, all the way down to Tijuana. Like that's our range right now. We're maxed out. We're going to try to expand. We don't know if it's going to be further in the U.S. or if we're going to go overseas to maybe Japan or Australia or just try something completely new. But, someday I hope to get it pushed back east, the demand is there. It's just a matter of it being financially smart. So
yeah, my buddy Packy just recently moved to San Diego, and he's been drinking it and loves it. And I think I'm gonna try to get him to ship me back a 6-pack or something sometime.
The beer industry is more, the craft beer industry, I should say, is more talk shitty than any snowboard or skate industry ever. Absolutely. I mean, craft beer guys are hardcore. So if your beer isn't good, you're going to hear about it, So I think we got really lucky that we actually made a beer that tastes good and the marketing is working too. I think our biggest holdback right now is just distribution. Like we'd like to get it other places, but it's when the time is right, it'll happen for sure.
Which one's your favorite?
I like the blonde. I'm more of a I like my sessionable beers where I'm not like completely hammered off of like something with massive alcohol content, But like some of our beers, some of our limited edition stuff, like we had a coffee stout for a little while on cask at the brewery that was amazing. It was so good, but it was a full, if you drank like a good size mug of beer, you were jacked. Like completely, I'd be belligerent. I'm a super lightweight, and I would just be like the happiest guy who needed a nap. Instantly.
So it's funny how you said the marketing was working, and kind of looking at it from that entrepreneurial lens. You guys really went in and created your own market space. There's no other real skateboarding beer besides the kind of the cliche like PBR or whatever's trendy in the skateboarding world. So kudos to you guys. It's really cool. I like what you're doing.
Thanks. You know, and we don't think of it so much as rocket science. We're like, well, we'll just do this and this will work. And the beer industry has been so blown away by the, you know, because we're basically trying to sell California lifestyle in a bottle or in a can. And the beer industry has been coming at it from a non-authentic place for a really long time. And they were just so blown away by the way that we handle. It's kind of like Ken Block, like came at auto racing from with a skate marketing mentality. Like it's so mundane to us, but like from outside the industry, it's like you're reinventing the wheel. So it's kind of cool.
It's very cool. So out of all the stuff on the internet, the Facebooks, awesome.com, where's your home? Where's your favorite place, your favorite social network?
These days, Instagram. It's fun and it's, you know, I think you can really tell a story a lot more on Instagram. You can really get to know who a human being is from their Instagram, for better or for worse. I kind of use my Instagram as like a stream of consciousness a lot more than I do about like, oh, I'm such a good photographer with my iPhone. It's more like whatever my ADD brain is thinking at that second. I don't follow the Instagram rules where it has to be like I took the photo and blah blah blah. I just put up whatevs, and yeah.
Do you take photos of asshole parking, or is that something?
Oh yeah, dude. I'm such
he's got some good ones.
Parking now. My buddy Chris and I. It started because of this coffee place that we frequent here in Encinitas. That we were just so shocked at the amount of disregard for adhering to parking lines. Like it's fucking believable, like the way that people park at this coffee shop. It's seriously staggering how dumb people are. So it just kind of took on this life of its own, just this asshole parking. And now we're getting submissions from people, and it's pretty funny, dude. Like the people park like complete morons, and it's I don't know. I kind of think like you ever play that game where like you see somebody walking down the street, or you see someone sitting there, and you and your friend like play the game.
Now I'm just gonna write my fucking name on him.
What was that?
Write your goddamn name on that.
What's up, dog? Oh, sorry. One of my buddies just walked in the room.
Yeah, don't eat his lunch, dude. That's what it's about.
Back to the bathroom, AJ.
While we're mentioning that, my boss Lane wanted to say hello.
Oh.
And
I know.
Lane Mack.
He's one of my all-time favorite snowboarders ever. I love that dude.
Oh wow, I'll tell him that. He said hello, and he wanted to, this is not me saying this. He wanted me to tell you that you are a pussy.
Thanks, Lane. Awesome.
Yeah, I'll let him know that, and then maybe he won't feel as good calling him pussy.
He'll still call me a pussy. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. That's the terms. I've pigeonholed myself into that form of affection within the sport where people say the worst thing to me possible. It's nice. I like it. But what the hell was I saying? Oh yeah. So you ever play that game where you're like sitting there with a friend and like you see somebody randomly and you kind of have the conversation that the other people are having? It's like, let's play the fake conversation game. What is that guy saying to that other guy? And it's like with the asshole parking, I sit there with my friend Chris and we're like, try to work out what the thought process was that this person was just like, fuck it, these lines don't mean anything to me. I will park however I want to. I don't give a shit about you or lines or the rest of the planet.
I would just assume that I had to shit my pants so bad that I've left my car here, keys in it, running wherever it is, just to get inside. That would be the only excuse for parking that bad.
I mean, there are people that are just like, they don't care if they block you in. They don't care if they make a space. I want my coffee, and I want my goddamn coffee now, and I don't care about you. And we finally we made up like little business cards that say like, congratulations, you parked like an asshole.
That's great.
And I kind of hide in the bushes and like wait to see. It's actually taking up way too much of my time at this point, and I kind of need to like let it go a little bit because, yeah, obviously I'm not that busy.
I'm down with that.
Do you find
man.
it's like a certain type of car or a certain type of person that parks like an asshole?
generally the more expensive the car is, the more asshole they park. Like Mercedes, and you can really, like, I have this whole thing because I really like cars and I'm super into my car, and I respect other people's automobiles to the point to like a fault. Like, look, this guy obviously, I'm not going to park near this guy because I don't want him to get freaked out. But then there's a certain type of like Mercedes or a certain type of Beamer where it's like, it's mom nice. Obviously they have some money, but then you look close at the car and the rims are just torn up to shit and the doors are fucking dinged. And that person doesn't give a shit who they park next to. They're opening their door into you. And I find that it's that kind of car that doesn't give a shit about how they park. Like they can't be bothered. They've got too much going on. Leave me alone.
She's on her cell phone. The kids are screaming in the back and she just wants her coffee and her little 2 minutes of peace.
Right, except for she's by herself and she's from Rancho Santa Fe and has no problems on the planet at all.
Oh, so the kids are with the au pair and she's late to yoga class.
Exactly. And fuck you, my small dog is coming in the restaurant with me.
I think we're getting ready to wind down here. I think Paul had one more question about a friend.
About snowboarding and all? I like this podcast. This is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about snowboarding sometimes, but we don't have to.
That's good.
Now, I heard a rumor years ago, and I never confirmed it, so I'm going to try to confirm it today. Back in Summit County, probably, I don't know, a decade or two ago, a friend of mine was living in Summit County, and I think you were living there at the time, and I guess there was a party or something going on, and my buddy, I'm not going to say his name, I'm going to protect his identity, but he's known as the Jerk. I don't know if you know him, but there was rumors that he rubbed Tiger Balm all over his body to get either a skate deck or a stack of decks from you.
Oh my God, I remember that. Not fucking Tom Thumb. What's that dude's name?
Jernigan.
What was his name?
Jason Jernigan.
Jernigan. Oh my God, Jernigan. It wasn't Jernigan. It was Jernigan and Dave Sipnewski.
Okay.
I made them rub Tiger Balm all over their balls, and they weren't allowed to say anything. I would buy them dinner and I gave them a skate deck, but they weren't allowed to say anything about the Tiger Balm on their nuts for the whole dinner.
Holy shit.
It was amazing.
Yeah, I remember hearing something about that story, and I always forget to ask him. I still go out to Colorado occasionally. He lives in Golden, so I'll go out there and skate and stay with him. But
I love Jeremy.
I always forget to ask him.
It was fair compensation. Like, I went above and beyond. Like, we had a really nice dinner, and I don't know how much they enjoyed it. But
were they just squirming in pain or what?
Sipnewski was like, he was a hard ass. Like, nope, I'm not going to make a face. It doesn't even bother me. Jernigan was like, because Tiger Balm, then you start to sweat because it hurts so bad. And when you put it on your balls and you sweat, the sweat just travels south into your butthole. So now your butthole is on fire and your ball bag. And then your underwear is pushing the Tiger Balm all over the place every time you squirm. So now your penis is covered in Tiger Balm as well as your ball bag and your butthole. So it's just like a migration of Tiger Balm, and it's just like it really is a hot mess is what happens down there.
I love it. It's great.
It was great.
Those commentating skills coming through. Were these your crazy friends that would go to 7-Eleven naked and have to buy stuff?
No, okay, so those guys were all my friends from Las Vegas who basically, I think they were really responsible for creating the persona that I have at this point in life. They were these dudes from Las Vegas who were going to school in Boulder, and I was like, when I moved out to Boulder, a lot of this is in the book, but I moved out to Boulder. I was just an East Coast kid who was really sheltered and never had really seen anything outside of Massachusetts, up until that point. And these dudes would just be nude. They were constantly naked. One of my buddies, the stories are just fucking endless. But there was one guy who had a pumpkin on Halloween that was called the Humpkin. It was a pumpkin he would just bone in the living room. He'd just come down humping a pumpkin. And then they played a skateboard game called Make It or Naked, where they would try really hard tricks, and every time you missed it, because they were all super, super good skaters, every time you would miss the trick, you would have to take off an article of clothing. They all had G-strings that they would wear, these musical G-strings that were like a pelican or an ostrich, and they would always wear these G-strings, and they'd be in a restaurant and they'd just take their clothes off down to the they had no, and they were kind of like really well-to-do families. At least one of them was, and they would constantly sneak into, like, they would never pay for anything. They would sneak in everywhere. They would always, like, there was always some angle, and I was always the kid who was like, I was the one getting caught because they would just bounce. But they would live like vagabonds. Like, they were the ones that would go to like the ski areas and have like the condiment buffet, like, oh, crackers, and then we'll put some relish on there, and then some. I'm like, you guys have like trust funds. Like, why are you? They just loved it. They loved being complete and total weird piles of shit. It was rad. They didn't care about anything. They would say anything to anybody, but they were like, you know, the best friends a human being could ever have. They were awesome.
And real quick, man, I don't want to take up too much of your time on your birthday, but dude, back growing up, I remember watching the whiskey videos and everything. Within the last 5 years, I've become a huge fan of vert skating. You were a ripping vert skater. You still skate any vert at all?
I don't skate vert as much as I used to, and by as much anymore. I don't think I've skated vert in the past 3 years, but I skate a lot of like bigger transition cement park stuff. But I haven't padded up. I've lost way more tricks than I've learned in the past, you know, few years. But I wish, man, you know, like, it's funny. Sometimes I'll be skating a park and I'll remember these tricks that I used to do and be like, there's no fucking way I would ever put myself in that position right now. You know, it was a big part of why I like to snowboard halfpipe back in the day, is because I was just pretending to be a good vert skater.
Absolutely. That's what I do all the time.
Do you want to see more people doing the wet cat? Are you bummed that people don't really do that trick anymore?
No, absolutely not. I mean, look, the wet cat, I mean, I don't know how many of the listeners are familiar with the way that whole thing even came around. But
best trick name ever.
I didn't name it. Billy Anderson named it because I learned it at Killington right before the U.S. Open one year. And I did a couple like smooth ones at Killington, and then it came time for the U.S. Open, and the U.S. Open pipe kind of turned into what it would back in the day, which was, instead of like a U, it looked more like 2-letter L's facing each other. So I had to do that trick, and I needed to get it around any way possible. So I would just flick myself off the lip and just double tuck it like as much as I could to get it around. And Billy was like, man, dude, that thing looked like a cat that got thrown in a bathtub, like a wet cat. And I was like, oh boy. And then everyone kind of heard that, and the wet cat stuck. I was just trying to do a backside 900. I really wish they looked more like Scotty Legos and a lot less like a cat thrown in a bathtub.
Todd, man, thank you so much for your time with us today. Kind of as we wind it down here, I have one final question for you.
Sure.
Drinking beer, snowboarding, or skateboarding, or cars. You can only do one. Which would it be and
surfing.
why?
Add surfing in there.
Oh, yes. Meant to add surfing in there. Good call.
Or Star Wars.
I'd probably at this point choose surfing, honestly.
Fuck yeah.
Because you can't get bored with something where the playing field changes every time you get to your feet.
And once you have what you need, it's free.
It's free. It is totally free, and it's good for you. And, well, it's free after you get past the $400 wetsuit and the $500 surfboard and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, it's one of those things where it's the most fun you can ever have, being constantly frustrated.
Very true.
So, yeah, surfing for sure. But, I mean, that in no way reflects on the lack of love I have for those other things, that's for sure.
Nope, I'm right there with you. Paul and I went surfing yesterday, and I stood up for a total between two waves that I actually stood up on for maybe 7 to 8 seconds. Yeah. And I would go back right now if I could.
Yeah, totally. It's like, look, you will deal with the elements at any, you know, just if it's good, you will find a way to go out there and suffer and make it fun for yourself. And it kind of reminds me of how snowboarding used to be in the beginning, where it was like, it was just so new and so fun, and you were so desperate to do it that it didn't matter if you were getting frostbite. You were still going to go and do it, you know? And that's kind of how surfing has grabbed onto my soul at this point, for sure.
Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying the podcast, please do us a huge favor and go over to iTunes and leave a review. That really helps more people find the podcast, and it only takes 2 minutes. Todd mentioned at the beginning that he's been riding insoles from my snowboard boot insole company, Shred Soles. What Shred Soles are a comfortable, canted replacement snowboarding insole. You can take your stock insoles out of your boots and drop in a pair of shred soles, and the canting will realign your ankles, knees, and hips to a more natural and balanced riding posture, while reducing heel lift and adding dynamic arch support, but most importantly, increasing comfort, right? Use the discount code TNSP at www.shredsoles.com for 10% off and free shipping through the end of this January. Join us next week for a conversation about retirement, rock climbing, and Walmart with Laura Hadar. Peace, and don't park like an asshole.
Thank you for listening to the Not Snowboarding podcast. To hear more episodes, go to www.notsnowboardingpodcast.com.